Well, let's get started by looking at some of the cultural explanations for this phenomena that is called teenage rebellion. First of all, even before I get into that, I think it's important to remind you, today is a new day. Today is a new day in your life. Do not look at your parenting from the past. If you had a terrible, miserable experience with your parents during these years, or even during the early years, the early 20s, do not use that as a basis as to what's going to happen with your children. You need to get your thinking in line with a biblical mindset. Remove yourself from cultural expectations and cultural norms and get over to biblical expectations and biblical norms. Now, regarding this phenomena, first of all, it has a very interesting definition. Teenage rebellion is culturally, that's the operative word, culturally defined as a period of rebellion identified by our society as something different than the rebellion found in adults and small children. Teenage rebellion is culturally defined as a period of rebellion identified by our society as something different than the rebellion found in adults or small children. Something should immediately come to mind, folks. The fact is, the Bible teaches that the rejection of a higher authority at any age is rebellion. It's not limited to a function of the teen years. That's not at all. Our little children were rebellious. Our children in the middle years are rebellious. Our teens are rebellious. You are rebellious. We're all rebellious. It's only by God's grace and His mercy that we have learned to put into our hearts, or our parents put into our hearts, the moral values and the principles that allowed us to govern ourselves to overcome the rebellious spirit that's natural and it's a predisposition in everyone. You know, one of the biggest obstacles in understanding the cultural phenomena of teenage rebellion is not correctly defining the problem or defining the root cause. For the last several years, our society has been searching for answers. And they've come up with some interesting explanations in trying to explain this phenomena of why teenagers rebel. Let me list at least the three most popular explanations offered by our society. The most popular one, of course, is it's chemical, it's hormonal. That's number one. The reason children rebel against their parents during the teen years is because there are so many hormonal changes, disruptions in their body, that has an influence on their relationship with their parents. A second one, which is very popular now in the last 7 or 8 years, is the reason teenagers rebel is because they have low self-esteem. You see, if they had a high self-esteem, they wouldn't rebel. Therefore, let's work on their esteem problem. And then the third reason that is offered is that it's an explanation that this is a natural struggle for teenagers. They're fighting childhood and adulthood. They're looking for independence, but they don't want to leave home. And that this is such a natural struggle. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, none of these suggestions have very much to do with teenage rebellion. They really don't have much to do with teenage rebellion at all. Certainly it's not hormonal. I mean, if it was hormonal, it's a worldwide phenomenon. If it was hormonal, I mean, teenagers of all cultures would be going through this. If it was simply hormones, the only ones who rebel are child-centered families, societies that are consumed in self-worship. It's not a world phenomenon. If it was hormonal, hey, we could take care of it. We'll just give them medication, right? We could just give them some pills or something. I mean, that would take care of it. Certainly hormones play a part in the child's life as he's transitioning from childhood and moving into adulthood. But it is not the basis, because those hormones don't affect the heart. Those hormones don't affect relationship. Those hormones affect the body. And it's not an issue of low self-esteem. It can't be that. It's not, because low self-esteem is not isolated to the teen years. And let me qualify this. If you want a fuller description, an understanding of the whole issue of self-esteem, I'd like to invite you to our series, God-Worth and the Self-Worth Crisis, in which we spend at least 12 sessions reviewing and talking about the entire issue, the current debate of self-esteem. Is there or is there not such a thing? And in general, we all suffer from low self-esteem. You know why? We're all fallen creatures. If there was a Such an emotion as self-esteem before the fall, it was badly damaged after the fall, it's unrecoverable. We can't simply say, well, low self-esteem. What about all the children, supposedly, all the teens have low self-esteem and they never rebel? So we can't just simply say, well, it's low self-esteem, they got a low view of themselves, so they're going to hate their parents. That doesn't make sense. Children who do not rebel go through this same desire for autonomy, too. We talk about that third reason, that whether they're searching for their independence. Look at your children from the day one were searching for independence. They have an autonomy drive. And remember, we hit this before. Autonomy or self-legislation by itself is morally neutral. There's nothing evil in self-control or self-rule. What makes it evil, what corrupts it, is the nature of man and the lack of self-control and self-discipline to control our ability to govern ourselves. Ultimately, in parenting, that's exactly what you want. We have been teaching you, by the time you reach the teen years, you want your children governing their own behavior by moral principle. I mean, this is exactly what we want. But to say this is the problem of teenagers, they're trying to find their identity, or they're trying to find themselves between childhood and adulthood, and you have this conflict and they don't know what to do, so they dump it all on parents. For us, that premise is totally unacceptable. Totally. Where does rebellion come from? Ladies and gentlemen, rebellion is a heart issue. Rebellion is a heart issue. Rebellion is the foolishness bound up in the heart of the child. Remember that from Proverbs 22:15. Rebellion is the absence of wisdom ruling at any moment. Rebellion is the absence of wisdom ruling at any moment. Here's our concern. Here's what I want to communicate to you tonight about this subject. The phenomena of what we are experiencing culturally, that some of you are so afraid of, you're concerned about, or some of you may even be in this already. The phenomena cannot simply be defined as rebellion. Adolescent struggles cannot exclusively be described or contained within that narrow classification, within the classification or the designation of rebellion. Please consider this. In fact, you're going to need to write this down someplace. Young children rebel against authority. Young children rebel against authority. Teenagers rebel against relationships. They rebel against relationships. You see, young children rebel against authority. They're in the process of developing a loving, give and take relationship with mom and dad and their siblings and all of those that are around. They rebel against authority because they're in the process of coming. Teenagers, it's different. No, you think about this. By the time they are teenagers, authority should be playing a very minor role because moral principle should be playing the major role. This is everything we've been giving you in terms of the progressive step. Authority should almost be not non-existent, but should be in the background, should almost be passive at this age. A child should be driven what? By devotion, not by duty. By principle, not by the fear of reproof or correction. By loyalty, not forced association. See, ultimately, folks, the lack of understanding of this principle is why I think so many youth workers fail to truly reach the teens that they're going after. They're very desirous, they're very open, they work hard, but they are working on symptoms, they're not working on the cause, the real root cause. They interpret the problem to be rebellion, so they try the buddy approach or the friendship approach, hoping to eliminate in the perception of a child any attachment to authority. And so they're going after trying to resolve this authority issue. And folks, it's not authority. Authority is not the villain. And although you see manifestation of rebellion, rebellion is not the issue. Because the natural course of rebellion happens throughout life. That's why we believe adolescent struggles is rooted first in relationships. And that's where we have to look. That's what we have to examine. That's what we have to go after. Rejecting parental relationships is the lowest common denominator of the problem. When we talk about rebellion, you're talking about symptoms. When you talk about why rebellion, what are they really doing? They're saying no to mom and dad. They're saying no to the relationship. No. Looking for the source of rejection rather than attempting to explain rebellion will bring everyone closer to solving this problem. You know, when I look around at great families, and we tend to do that, we tend to look at the strong families, the healthy families, and we realize that although many in the last 20 years have been victimized by secular philosophy, unfortunately much of it that's crept into the church, sprinkled some verses on it, and it's become Christianized. That victimization has left broken homes in its wake. Even teenage suicide. But when you examine those healthy families, there are so many things that have in common. Loyalty. A common respect for who mom and dad are. An appreciation. You know, it wasn't so child-centered in that mom was always doing her thing and dad was out there doing his level 2 fatherly responsibility, sustenance and provision. That there's trust in the relationship. There's a give and take. There's that beautiful sense of freedom to express because the child has absolute self-control over their passions, their lips, their emotions. When you look at healthy families, you see all of these children had chores, little jobs to do around the house. Why? So that they can have a sense of giving to the family. Let me develop this issue a little further. Why do some teens reject their parents? Number one, there's obviously intrinsic factors. Every child is born an existentialist. Your children. You know, your children were born an existentialist. An existentialist is one who has the maximum pursuit of pleasure, the minimum amount of pain. They desire the minimum amount of pain. See, every child is born an existentialist. Your job is to move them over into the biblical category, the biblical column. Children do not have the moral resources to move towards godliness and loving family relationships. Parents, you cultivate this over time. You've got to cultivate this over time. You do it with the little things again, with those family responsibilities. Everything we've given you in growing kids, the last 17 weeks together, these are the things that you need to instill. So there are intrinsic factors, but more importantly are the extrinsic factors. Why do our children ultimately end up rejecting their parents? And it may be rejection temporarily, but often it's much more than that. Number one, the primary, and we're talking about extrinsic factors, the primary one is the parents themselves. That is the number one extrinsic factor on a child. You are the greatest influence on your child, or at least you should be the greatest influence. You're going to be by intent or neglect. You still will be the greatest influence. I was thinking today as I was just going through these notes about a time reflecting back. A most interesting scenario was presented to us, quite by accident. We were waiting to catch a bus. And there was a car that pulled out the corner, came to the stop sign. In this car was this young mother. In the back seat of this car was a car seat with this beautiful little girl. I would say this little girl was no more than a year, maybe 15 months old. Happy, smiling, a child that you could adore. That car pulled out. Right behind that car, just a moment later, came another car. In this car were two teenagers who desired an identity that would be antisocial, who had all of the entrapments, all of the verbiage, all of the clothing, all of the hairstyle, and yes, even some of the grease. And I looked at them and I thought, how ironic. Here, just before these two, and by the way, you can look into their eyes and look into their faces and you can see there was turmoil. There is no peace. And I thought, how ironic. Moments before I have a baby sitting in the back seat, the next car comes along and there's these two teenagers. And I'm sure when these two teenagers, when they were babies sitting in a car seat, their mothers and fathers never dreamed or expected this or desired this. And I couldn't help but ask the honest, hard question. What happened? What happened from the time of being a baby in a car seat? When you have a child who is so naturally attracted to you, even abused children will have a desire and attraction to the parent that abuses them because they have such a strong desire for a relationship with that parent. What happened in 15 years? What happened in 10 years? To say it's a matter of chance? To say that parents had absolutely no responsibility? The greatest influence is going to be you parents. And the greatest influence on your parenting is your philosophy. Every philosophy of parenting has a corresponding pathology, folks. Every philosophy of parenting has a corresponding pathology. Every philosophy of parenting has a corresponding disease track. Every philosophy of parenting has a corresponding health track. It all depends what you choose. See, it all has to come back to parenting. 100%? No, I'm not saying 100%, but I'm saying a great percentage. I don't know what it is, but a great percentage. Now, out of the list of many extrinsic possibilities that lead to rejection of parents, there are 4 predominant ones that I would like to touch upon in this session. There's 4 of them. Almost in one sense, some of these are going to be warnings to you, since most of you have the younger children. But number 1, and I'll list them and then we're going to go through them. Number 1, here are the extrinsic possibilities that lead to rejection in later years. Number 1, child-centered parenting. The curse, if you want to add, the curse of child-centered parenting. Number 2, it's the other extreme. What causes children to reject their parents? It's authoritarian parenting. Authoritarian parenting. Number 3, it's the influence of emotional abandonment. Emotional abandonment. And then number 4, it's the lack of family identity. The lack of family identity. Just for a review, let's talk about child-centered parenting. Many parents fear conflict. That's the problem. Maybe because of your past. Maybe the way your parents treated you. Maybe they were too harsh. Maybe they were manipulative. Maybe you grew up under conditional love and now you want to make sure that your children will always love you. And so you are susceptible to a strategy that is conflict-free, and that's permissive parenting. That's child-centered parenting. Child-centered parenting wonderfully will avoid all conflict. Therefore, any challenges to your memory. Children need to be loved. And as I've already stated with you, parents, children also need the opportunity to give love. What child-centered parenting does is it robs the child of the ladder. Everything's poured out to the child. He is the center of the universe. And he doesn't know how to respond to relationships. We have robbed our children of any ability to give back to anyone a meaningful relationship. We've taken away all of the opportunities, leaving a vacuum in its wake. And out of that vacuum, out of that void, comes drugs, illicit sex, depression, rejection of parents, and in many cases, unfortunately, suicide. Child-centered parenting is one of the most dangerous things you can do to your kids. To me, child-centered parenting, it's absolute abuse. We should legislate it out of existence. It is abusive. Because of what it does to the husband-wife relationship. What do you do to your child's security? Child-centered parenting, if you're going to raise your children under a child-centered parenting methodology, permissive parenting methodology, you are a right candidate for a teenager rejecting you. Why? One simple reason. They never knew they needed to have a relationship with you. That's why. Number 2 is authoritarian parenting. This is the other extreme. Remember I said in one of the early sessions, when the rules are suspended for the parents but enforced for the child, you have authoritarian parenting. That's the moral rule. When you have a division as to what is expected in the home. You know, we teach our children not to lie. Don't lie. If you lie, they know there's going to be a consequence. And then our children are sitting around when we get a phone call and we hear Dad say back to Mom, tell him I'm not home. You're lying. And I want to tell you that it's the hypocrisy that leads a child to want to walk away from your relationship. It's that hypocrisy. You see, when they're little, they can't do it. Your sheer force just controls the child. But once they get eye to eye with you, Once they're out with their friends and they start to associate with others just like them who have the same problem, they no longer can tolerate your hypocrisy. And authoritarian parenting leads to that. They cannot stand it. And then number 3, there is emotional abandonment. Boy, this is tough. There is a third reason teens reject one or both parents. It's this emotional abandonment resulting from divorce and remarriage. I know this can be a very painful thing to talk about, but it has to be said so that you understand the dynamics of what we're facing here. The most basic need children have is the need to know that parents love each other. That is so fundamental in growing kids godly. After a divorce, the secret desire of every child is that someday Mommy and Daddy will get back together again and we will be able to live as a family. That's what they dream about. That's what they hope in their hearts. There is such a drive that a child wants Mommy and Daddy together. Remarriage then removes that possibility. You see, no child wants to see another man become their daddy or another woman become their mommy when their daddy or their real mommy, their biological parents, standing in the wings. When there's reconciliation, it's still possible. You see, if a child has a strong memory of the biological parent living together and then divorce and remarriage takes place, the possibility of teen stress is absolutely heightened. And then if you have a step-parent relationship that is weak, the probability is even higher. If the step-parent relationship is strong, where patience, where love for the biological parent is manifested, where the family values are not imposed but lived out, rebellion may be totally bypassed. We have seen this in our blended families. Now let me remind you that children are absolutely dependent on their parents for their world being made secure. When that world comes crashing down, younger children respond by withdrawing, but teens respond with anger. They respond with rejection. You call it rebellion, but the bottom line is they are saying no to this relationship for whatever reason. We treat the symptom. We want to go after the rebellion. We want to tell them, well, it's your heart condition. You have to get right with the Lord. If you don't get right with the Lord, this won't happen. We're saying all of those things are true, but we want to go beyond that. We want you to know you have to pursue the relationship. That's the only way you're going to have recovery. Much of that anger is derived from the sense of the child's, the sense of emotional abandonment. That's where we get the title. You see, once mommy or daddy are remarried, the hope of being a family again is lost forever. It'll never happen. And then you throw in the possibility of having to compete with a step-parent for love, and you got a potential time bomb on your hands. When rebellion and rejection takes place, given these facts, it is a most difficult situation to turn around. It can be done, folks. So that's the thing. It can be done, but it is difficult. That's emotional abandonment, and that's the cause for rejection. And I do want to say that we do have, some of you are very much aware of that, we do have Growing Kids Godly for the blended family. We have Growing Kids Godly for the blended family. We have the Growing Through the Teen Years for those who are struggling, want to make things right, want to restore the relationship. We have all of those. But for you with the younger ones, you need to be thinking futuristic. This is exactly what you want to prevent. And then number 4, lack of family identity. Maybe another way of saying it is making family relationships optional. This is a curse. Now that your children are old enough to pick their friends, my question to you is this. Will you be part of their friends? Will you be on the inner circle? Do they consider you part of their most important inner circle, loyal friends? You know, our children did. What a joy that was. What an absolute joy to realize that our children included us as their dearest friends, right alongside the category as their mom and dad. That was not chance. That took work. But if it's possible for us, the good news is it's possible for you. Family structures in general can aid or detract from that goal. And in our society, there are 2 predominant family structures. that are competing with one another. There is what is called the interdependent family and what is called the independent family. One is interdependent, one is independent. If I was to describe the interdependent family, I'd say take your family, take 3 or 4 folks, 5 people, put them in a circle and have everyone hold hands, look inside. That's the interdependent family. Everyone is looking. Everyone can see each other. There's a give and take. The values and the norms for behavior are all inside that circle. From dad to mom, mom to the children, children back to mom and dad. All of it's working inside the circle. Everyone is interdependent. When we got married and we had children, we grew up with our children. And many of you are doing the same thing right now. Many of you young ones. You're old, but when you get to our age, you'll realize you were very young. You are in the process of growing up too. And when you have that interdependent family, there's the opportunity to say, I'm sorry. Not just having your children say, I'm sorry to you, but you saying, I'm sorry to them. Being vulnerable. And still maintaining the beautiful status as mom and dad. What type of family structure are you cultivating? You see, a child's sense of belonging is cultivated in the interdependent family. You contrast that now with the independent family. You take the same circle of people, hold hands, but instead of everyone looking in, hold hands and have everyone look out. See, on the outside, it still looks like a family. I mean, you still have a circle. You still live in one house. But actually, you only have a mutual consent to live together. There is no relationship. Because now the influences are not from within the circle. The influences independently are from outside the circle. There's dad doing his thing. There's mom over here. The children have all of their influences. And there is no cohesiveness because there's no common value in the family. Everyone's encouraged to do their own things. And that's because family relationships are optional. They're not a mandate. For the Ezo family, they were an absolute mandate. God put us together. We are family. We are an interdependent family. We are as dependent on our children, and our children are dependent on us. Both are true. You see, with the independent family, as each member becomes more and more absorbed in his own world, each gradually grows more independent of the other. And the children subtly learn that family ties, they're just not important. There's no reason for the child to desire a relationship with his parents, so he or she will take on the conformity of whatever peer group there is that could pull them away and meet some of the most fundamental needs that they have in their life. Now listen, people. This is the good news. You can have the same influence on your children and on your teens. You can, as your children's peers have on them. You can experience the same loyalty that they give to their peer group. In fact, you can have greater loyalty. Please understand, this is not a cliche. We believe this to be a statement of truth. Peer pressure on a child is only as strong as family identity is weak. Peer pressure on your children is only as strong as family identity is weak. How strong or weak is your family identity? You, who you are. Your last name, for example. Remember the Father's mandate? We talked about this. Your last name represents a faith system, a belief system. This is who you folks are. Peer pressure on a child is only as strong as family identity is weak. So that family identity means one thing. It automatically assumes we've got to work on relationships. We've got to work on trust. Is there any hope for the broken home? Some of you are struggling and you're wondering, gee, it doesn't sound like there's much, but there is. Is there any hope for parents who have been delinquent in training their children, who have been victimized by wrong philosophy, who with good intent and with sincere hearts, but with wrong information, ultimately severed their own relationships with their children? How can we correct what seems to be hopeless? Well, first of all, in God's economy, it's never too late. Never too late to make corrections. The fact that parents are willing to and ready to admit that they made a mistake in training is going to go a long ways in the healing process. You need to understand you are not fighting rebellion, folks. You are fighting rejection. Are you willing to fix that? Are you willing to say, okay, what must I do? Without biblical compromise, what must I do to become almost a friend with you? Because we are not talking young children, we're talking teens now. Again, we have put together a special edition of Growing Through the Teen Years to help parents. If some of you need to partake of that, then that's fine. In that series, we present a philosophy of recovery for all members of broken homes who now desire to make things right. See, that's the thing. You've really got to desire to make things right. I have had fathers in my office, and I have had them in my office with their sons, their teenage sons. And those fathers are so willing to say, well, he's like this and he does this. But they were never willing to do anything themselves. You see, they wanted to maintain the mantle of authority, but they never wanted to give themselves to a relationship. It's so painful to see teens like that. I don't find contempt with teenagers who are looking and acting like the world. You know, when someone pulls up alongside of me with whether their music or the way they look in the car and the windows down, and they got, you know, I have disciplined myself to say, you must be hurting an awful lot inside. It's more than just trying to find an identity, your own identity, because if it was your own identity, then why do you look like everyone else who's been rejected? You see, we need to understand and go beyond what is on the outside. We need to be looking at what is on the inside, and what's on the inside is a little boy or a little girl who has a broken heart. It absolutely crushes me whenever I think back in my own relationship with my own children to think that I may have said something hurtful or painful without control of my tongue. Realizing as I look back by the grace of God how wonderful the relationship is, Lord, could it have been better? And then to think there are so many mothers and fathers who just don't care. They want their own way. They have no understanding of biblical ethics and the give and take, and that the rules are the same for everyone. For you, who predominantly make up growing kids God's way, many of you still have time. Time is still on your side. Some of you are in the middle years and you're wondering, but time is still on your side. You need to redeem your time wisely. You need to take ownership of your family. I remember having prepared one message to give to a group of fathers. And so I just asked my daughter Jennifer, I said, Jennifer, we're teaching on fathers, and your own reflections, just what you see around. Don't say anything about your dad, but just, what do you say around? What do you see? Tell me something about what can I say to these dads? How can I warn them? What do you see as a problem? She didn't even have to think for a minute. She says, Dad, the biggest problem that young fathers have is that they have too many tomorrows. Too many tomorrows. She says, yeah. She said, I think that is the number one problem that too many young fathers have. They have too many. They have too many tomorrows. Tomorrow I'll play catch. I'm working now, or I'm studying now. Well, I got to get this lawn mowed. Tomorrow I'll play catch. Tomorrow we'll go fishing. Tomorrow we'll write books. See, the problem with you men, you get too many tomorrows, and before you know it, those tomorrows are going to be gone, and you cannot go back in the digital counter and push it to zero and hope that you can start all over. It's gone. You need to be redeeming the time wisely, men. Mom, same thing with you. You guys need to be praying for your children every day. And if you're not praying for your children, what are you doing? You need to be praying for your children every day. Not only your children, you need to be praying for your children's mates. And then you need to be training your children to be praying for their mates. When we put this into Amy's heart and mind that she needs to, at 12 years old, pray for her mate, it was in that month. It was in that month when she started. That 3,000 miles away, as she began to pray for her husband-to-be, that her husband trusted the Lord. See, she was praying for her husband. Jennifer prayed for her husband. See, that's all part of family identity. These are the things that help push away this sense of fear and lack of relationship. Hey, we're in this together. We're praying for your husband. It's time for you to start praying. We're praying for your wife. It's time for you to start praying. Listen, folks, you need to take ownership of your relationship. We live in an age of non-accountability, non-responsibility. We have no-fault insurance. We have no-fault divorce. Today, we have no-fault parenting. It's almost become fashionable not to accept responsibility. How do we explain the absence of personal responsibility over 20 years of our society? I mean, prior to 1970, everyone took responsibility. Listen to some of the ghost voices of our recent history who attempt to explain why man is not responsible for his own behavior and why parents are not responsible for their children. Karl Marx said, man is not responsible for his own behavior because his behavior really is economically predetermined. Sigmund Freud said man's not responsible for his own behavior because his behavior is prenatally predetermined. Charles Darwin said man is not responsible for his own behavior because his behavior is genetically predetermined. John Dewey said man is not responsible for the way he is. He's not responsible for his actions because it's educationally predetermined. Gene Dixon said man's not responsible for the way he is because it's astrologically predetermined. B.F. Skinner says man's not responsible for the way he is. He's not responsible for the things that he does because it's environmentally predetermined. There's only one voice in the past that really counts, and that's Jesus Christ. Never did he give a stewardship parable, a story of a steward, where that steward was not 100% responsible for what he had. When we look at the simple one in Matthew 25, where he gave 5 talents to one, he gave 2 talents to another, and 1 talent to the third. And then he came back and he says, so what did you do with them? And the one who had the 5 invested, and the one who had the 2 invested. And the one who had the 1 said, I did nothing. I hid it. I kept it safe. Jesus did not say, well, you tried. I mean, your heart was right. I mean, it's good. You were conservative. Who was the one that was punished and who was blessed? You see, Jesus does hold us. We are stewards over children. When you die and stand face to face with God, you will not stand there childless. The moral destiny of your children is largely influenced by you. What they become in the future is largely a reflection of what you are now, what's in your heart, what's in your mind. Folks, we want you to enjoy your children. We really do. But you've got to take ownership of them. You've got to take ownership of their hearts. You've got to take ownership of the only plan that can deliver this, and that is a biblical model for parenting. How can you minimize the potential of teenage rebellion? Let me put that question into perspective. Parenting to prevent teenage rebellion is not your goal. Raising a moral child is. Holiness is the issue, not their happiness. If you get the holiness, you will get the contentment that comes with it. We cannot guarantee perfect teen years. I'm not going to stand up here and say if you do this, you're going to have wonderful teen years. I can't guarantee that because there's a subjective issue here, and that subjective issue is you. There is no formula that can guarantee anything. We can't do that. But we can stand up here and encourage you to teach to the standard, train to the standard, correct to the standard, encourage to the standard, and live to the standard, and then let God take it from there. Because when you live below the standard, and you teach below the standard, and you encourage below the standard, and you correct below the standard, do not assume that God is under any obligation to extend His grace, because He's not. Parents who follow biblical precepts are rewarded by God Himself, according to Hebrews 6. To assume any different is a contradiction of our faith. But our faith has to have teeth. Our faith has to have quality. Our faith has to be measured. Our faith is just not a feeling or emotion. It has to be qualified. And it's qualified with the Word of God and biblical precepts that guides the hearts of His people. You can have great families. That's the good news. You can have wonderful teen years. We expect you to do that. We really see no reason, after being with you all these weeks, why any of you with young ones should walk out of here fearing the teen years. It's going to be wonderful. You know, they put themselves to bed. They put you to bed. It's wonderful. You are the predominant influence. The last generation was victimized by wrong philosophy, child-centered philosophy. No one warned the last generation, folks. You listen, you young parents. No one warned them. They were victimized. Not even the church warned from the pulpits. You have been given much. In fact, we believe you have more right information, more right biblical information in parenting than any generation in the history of the church. God is going to do something with you. I don't know what He's going to do. He's going to do something with you. To whom much is given, though, much is required. We've been together for 18 sessions. Emery and I have endeavored to communicate biblical principles of moral conduct that can make your family strong. We want you to enjoy your children. More than that, we want other people to enjoy your children. We want them to be a blessing to humanity. We want them to be a witness. We want them to be a witness of what life is like when Christ is in a life. When God's principles radiate from the center of their life. Please understand, these principles are far more than just for your family. These principles are far more than just for your joy, far more than just for your comfort. We are literally fighting for cultural survival. You see, it takes 2 generations to bring about change. We lost the last generation to the existential humanists. They had our tax dollars and they had the public school classroom. There's only 1 generation left, and if they get it, winner takes all. We need this generation just to neutralize the loss of the last generation, and then we need to go after your grandchildren and their hearts and their minds. Biblical ethics speaks to life's purpose, and the duty of parents is to prepare the next generation to take moral control of society. Without a sense of otherness, without a sense of fairness, without a sense of compassion, without a sense of honesty, without a sense of integrity, without a sense of biblical justice, there is no hope for this democracy. Because this democracy was not built on ethics. This democracy, ladies and gentlemen, was built on biblical ethics. The fact that others are trying to rewrite history has nothing to do with the reality. It was biblical ethics. Sewn into the moral fabric of the citizenship was an otherness. This is the only reason why this democracy made it. Is because there was honesty and integrity and fairness and justice in law and political theory, in education, in morality, in medicine, in every area of life. The family, too. The family is the value-generating institution of our society. All values come from the family. Once the family becomes secular in its thought, secular in its methodology, there is no hope for the culture. And that's why we're saying to you, this is going beyond your own happiness, your own comfort level. We are literally talking about saving the union. If God allows your witness. We believe it's very possible. In fact, we believe it's probable. The way we measure things, what we have seen, what we understand to be the case. Your children will very likely be the last generation to know freedom in America. Because once you remove the moral foundation that was based upon the Bible, then the only thing left is man's opinion and his selfish heart. And group after group will fight for survival and supremacy. Whatsoever a nation sows, that also what it will reap. And the only saving grace that we have is God has given us one more generation of children to turn this thing around. It's your children. You need to take growing kids God's way again. And then take it again. And then take it again. And when I get to the 5th edition, take it again. Not just for yourself, but there's a message here. Thus, we speak to you parents with a great, great sense of urgency. We are in the sunset of our society. Now listen, these words were written to you. These are the words of Solomon. In chapter 1, he's saying to you, wisdom. Wisdom is crying to you. As wisdom shouts in the street, she lifts her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy street, she's crying out. At the entrance of the gate in the city, she utters her sayings. How long, O naive ones, will you love simplicity? And scoffers delight themselves in scoffing? How long will fools hate knowledge? Turn at my reproof. He says, if you do, behold, I will pour out my Spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. Why? So you will know how to live. Now listen to what the Lord says to those who will not turn to Him. In verse 24. Because I called you and you refused, I stretched out my hand and no one paid attention. And you neglected all of my counsel and did not want my reproof. Oh, listen to this. I will laugh. I will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your dread comes. When your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish comes on you. And then in that scene, what is the natural inclination of man immediately? Verse 28. Then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they shall not find me. Because they hated knowledge and they did not choose to fear the Lord, they would not accept my counsel. They spared all my reproof, so they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be satiated with their own devices. For the waywardness of the naive, you know who that is? I think that is our children. That's what Solomon's talking about. This is our children. For the waywardness of our children shall kill them, and the complacencies of fools shall destroy them. But he who listens to me shall live securely, yes, even in this society, with families collapsing all over our country, all around us. You shall live securely, and you shall be at ease from the dread of evil. Folks, there's so much more here. There is so much more here. You have enough to do with just raising your children. Remember the goal. It's to raise a morally responsible child who will know the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, who can make a difference in your home and in your society. We opened up by talking about teenage rebellion. The issue is not rebellion, it's relationship. From the beginning, I have been talking about relationship. It's all relationship. Relationship. Cultivating loyalty without compromise. As a mom, as a dad, as a husband, as a wife, siblings, parenting is not impossible. But it is something that you have to do. Life is full of choices. Now before you is probably the most important choice you have. Because you're not just parenting your children. What you do now, ladies and gentlemen, will be carried almost 150 years into the future. Your parenting will be carried 4 generations. Your influence 4 generations into the future. What will you give the future? What will you give your children? On behalf of Emory to our class here, thank you for the opportunity to come and share with you every week. It's been a great week. I appreciate it. And now we're going to be going to wrap up with Emory.
Well, that was quite a challenge that you gave us all, Gary, from Proverbs 1, and one that hopefully I know myself personally challenges me even today, and our children are grown. But we need to be constantly reminded, and I would just pray that the Holy Spirit would work in your hearts also. When you do get discouraged, go back to that scripture and reread it. It definitely is a motivator as far as pursuing righteousness and doing what is right in our families. There's not really a lot that we want to necessarily share as regards to this evening's lesson. One thought, though, regarding family identity. 1 Corinthians 15:33 tells us that bad company corrupts good morals. That definitely does apply, though, to family identity.
It does apply very much, and we'd like to encourage you families out there to stick together. Stick around people who are like-minded. They will become some of the dearest friends that you'll ever have. Maybe some of you are in a Growing Kids God's Way group right now. Get each other's phone numbers. Call each other up. Encourage one another.
And this is where iron sharpens iron. We can learn from one another if we just make ourselves teachable to one another, and plus we can pray for one another, if nothing else, and just help each other know that don't grow weary of doing what is right.
And it's encouraging, too, to your children. We've seen many times, so I know just watching ours growing up when they found parents that were like-minded with us, and the parents were working on the same thing. It's like, oh, that family does what we do. And so it builds confidence in you as parents. It builds confidence in the Word of God because they all know where their parents are getting the standard from. And it does build a sense of family identity, of this is one more thing that our family does. We follow the principles of God's Word in establishing all of our relationships. Another scriptural thought, really, that has been a favorite of mine all through our parenting years, and I've shared many times in Galatians. You shared part of that, Julie, just now, in Galatians 6:9, but actually I'd like to start back in verse 7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that will he also reap. And we can just apply that to a parent and to our parenting. Whatever we as parents sow within our family, that is what we're going to reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. And if we're going to follow man's wisdom, way back to the secular mystics, we are going to reap what man says and not what God says. That he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. And I really want to encourage you. We all want to encourage you because we know that it's hard work. We have been through the process. We're at the other end. We're now watching our children go through the process. And God has blessed us with many young friends and given us opportunity to watch them also go through the process of parenting, and again, seeing how His blessings just befall everyone as we are obedient to His Word.
Should we do it all again?
Yeah, we'd encourage parents to take Growing Kids God's Way again and again. We've been through it probably 10 times, and it seems like every time we go through it, we're at a different stage in our life, our children are at different ages, and different things are applicable, and we only remember a small part of what we've learned the first go-around. Seems like when we first start out on the venture, it seems a little overwhelming, an 18-week commitment, but before you know, we're building relationships with people there, and we need that accountability, so we would encourage, yes, parents to take it again.
Well, I know we've worked with many leaders. You yourselves have taught the class several times also. What are some suggestions that people have done to keep their groups together when they've decided to do so?
Well, sometimes at the end of the class, they've taken a short break and then proceeded on with another class that you folks teach. It's called Reflections of Moral Innocence, and it's in there that you teach the facts of life to your children without morally corrupting them, and it's an excellent class. It was very life-changing for Eric and I in our thinking, kind of a continuation with the Growing Kids God's Way.
How about reunions, potlucks, things like that?
Those are all fun and keep accountability and keep you in tune to what's going on and just keep you up with each other's lives.
That's right. That's good.
And it's always fun for the children, too, to get back together again.
Really.
Another thought, too, because some of you, as you've gone through this, you'd like possibly even a deeper understanding of where so many of the foundations came from. You may find yourself expecting another child. there is preparation for parenting, which is it's primarily geared towards couples that are expecting their first child when they're in their second or third trimester of pregnancy, but to set that biblical mindset. And we found that many couples that have gone through growing kids thought, boy, I'd like to go back and see what has brought me to this point in my parenting. And it's given them some real insights. And particularly, there may be some of you that are thinking down the road, this is a ministry that I might like to be involved in. And so we would encourage you in that way, too, to get the whole mindset that's involved.
It's so much easier to train rather than to retrain if I can help the preparation for parenting out, because to start out from day one is much easier than some parents who have started when their child's 7 or 8 and had to back up some principles that they hadn't applied.
That's good. That's good. We are here attempting to help you from birth on. We want you to enjoy your family. This has been a real challenge to all of us, Growing Kids God's Way, all of the weeks being together. Before we close the entire series, some final thoughts from our friends Eric and Julie.
Well, as parents, I would like to challenge you to go through the book of Proverbs. I know Anne-Marie challenged me with that very early on in my parenting, to kind of crawl through. There's so much applicable in there for the parents, and so that you can be wise to what the Lord has to say in that particular book, which is very impactful to me to know that.
All of these things that we've been sharing really put walking shoes on our Christian faith. And this is a very practical way for you to live out your life as a Christian, but also to teach that to your children by way of your example and all. And just one last thought, and that is regarding your own witness. Let your children be the witness for you. You don't need to be going about telling people about this great new class that you've been involved in or bragging about that. Let your children be the witness for you.
And they will come. Parents will come because of the witness of your children, and they will ask you, how did you do it? In a sense, it's God's pat on the back. God affirming you that you have applied the principles. And so he's bringing other people in saying, help me. And what a great witness that is. It really is. And then you are authorized, when others come and ask you, how did you do it? You are authorized then to speak to the principles, speak about growing kids God's way. Emery, how about yourself? Some closing thoughts?
Well, just to add possibly to what you had just shared, we also need to walk in humility. It's because of God's grace that he led us to a class, he led us to maybe a fuller understanding of the principles that are in his word, and then his grace to help us to apply those principles, because it is not easy, it doesn't come easy. And we'd also like a picture of your class. We have many albums filled with Growing Kids God's Way groups just like yourself, and it's an encouragement to us to be able to see who you are, and it also gives us an opportunity to pray for your class. We realize now that you've been 18 weeks, we've all been together. You may remember back to that very first lesson when Gary shared with you the thought that biblical ethics, when you apply those to your life, they challenge the status quo. Well, hopefully now many of you experientially understand that remark. And so we want to be in partnership together.
That's right. Biblical ethics does challenge the status quo, and that's exactly what we need to do in our society, challenge the status quo. We live in a morally bankrupt society. You are now lights. To whom much is given, much is required. Scriptures teach us that. You probably have in your hands right now, after all of these weeks of being together, studying, working hard together, applying principles, you have more right biblical information than any generation in the history of the church as it relates to parenting. To whom much is given, much is required. We trust that you will move to that sense of urgency that we have, that we started with, and realize that it's more than just parenting for your family, it's more than just parenting for the moment. It's parenting for our very society. It's parenting for the next generation, and then unto the next generation and the next generation. Thank you for joining us in Growing Kids God's Way. Pray for us as we pray for you, and God bless you.